Okay, guys, I'm going to be addressing another um, frustrating argument pro abortion people use. And I've addressed this before. Sorry, I had to get my lighting. I've addressed this before, but I'm going to readdress it because this is actually the one that irks my nerves. Like, I actually get angry when people use this argument, and that is people who justify abortion because adoption, foster care, and children being abused. It absolutely irritates my spirit because not only are those people devaluing very real people who are born into those circumstances with no fault of their own, people who are adopted, people who end up in foster care, people who are abused by their parents, you know, those children are victims themselves, right? And it almost is a form of victim blaming, is how I honestly view it, because you're justifying murdering children because of the potential abuse they could endure. That's also not their fault. A child that is being abused, it's always the parent's fault. A child being in foster care, that's also the parent's fault. A child being adopted, I mean, the parents gave them up for adoption. I also don't think adoption equals abuse, the way some people try to equate the two. Foster care also doesn't equal abuse. These are separate issues. I feel like adoption, foster care, and children being abused are all different issues. Yes, there are many kids who grow up in foster care that can't have abusive situations, but the abusive situations can be coming from their parents that they lived with prior to getting to foster care, because most kids get into foster care because they are being abused by their parents to begin with, right? That is not that child's fault. That child is not deserving of death because their parents chose to abuse them. The parent is always at fault, right? And I don't understand why we can't separate, like, this child is a victim of something someone else did to them, and then you're equating that because someone abused them, someone should also be allowed to just kill them altogether, or like equating like that person's life as making someone else who might end up in that situation unworthy of life, or they should be aborted instead, because you are devaluing kids who grow up who are adopted, kids who grow up in foster care, kids that were abused. You are devaluing their lives when you make this argument that it's better for that child to be aborted than end up in those situations. Understand what you're actually arguing for when you make that statement. And that's why it irks my nerves, because how dare you? How dare you minimize the importance or the value of someone else's life because of the circumstances that were out of their control, that they grew up in, that aren't their own fault? How dare you devalue their life and their existence? Now, I understand I don't have the lived experience that some of those people do. And I know people who have a history of abuse and a history of being in the foster care can grow up to have very severe issues because they have dealt with so much trauma. But I hope anyone who has been and experienced that knows that their life is so valuable, they are so worthy, and that they are here for a reason. And what someone else did to them does not make them unworthy of life. That their parents not wanting them does not make them unworthy of life. That them being abused, that them being in foster care does not make them unworthy of life or any less valuable than any other person on this planet. Yes, they have gone through and lived through very traumatic things that I would not wish on anyone. But abortion does not fix those issues. That's the other side of it. Just saying we should just abort those children does not take away abusive people doing those things, because abortion does not fix the issue of people being abusive. So, it's not only is it not a solution to the issue, you're also still just saying, let's go ahead and kill babies instead of fixing these issues, you know? The fix to this, the solution to kids being in foster care is let's just kill them, right? I don't understand that. Anyways, I'm very passionate about this because I hate this. I personally have a friend who's adopted. Her mother is a drug addict. She had a very traumatic childhood. Um, she's going to therapy because of it, right? But I would never tell her that I think her life is not valuable, that she doesn't matter, that, it's better that someone be aborted than grow up and have the experience she has, because I just feel like I'm so grateful she's here. I'm so grateful she exists. She has such a beautiful heart. She has such a beautiful spirit. You would not know half of the stuff that she's been through by how she acts. Now, I'm not saying there's not signs of it. Like, she definitely still has a lot of trauma that she has to heal through and go through. But I would never tell her, instead of you existing, if I knew a child that was going to grow up potentially in your circumstances, I would abort them. I would never say such a thing, because that's truly just not the heart I have. I would never devalue someone else's life like that or look down on someone else's life like that. Do you realize, to say that abortion is better than growing up in that circumstances, that you're basically telling that person your life is so horrendous that death is better than that, right? You're literally claiming, it's such a slap in the face, in my opinion. I feel like, though, I understand that there are very people who grow up with that trauma, and they have the trauma from it, right? So it's like these two wrongs don't make a right. Basically, it's wrong for those children to be abused, and I also still believe it's wrong for innocent children to be aborted in the womb. I also feel like aborting a child in the womb based off of the assumption of abuse they would experience without actual proof they would actually experience any of those things is also still, it doesn't cancel it out, right? Because you're killing that child with not really knowing for sure that they're going to be abused or that they would be victims, unless you, the parent themselves, are planning on abusing them, which killing someone is still the most abusive thing that you could do. So at the end of the day, you're still just supporting abuse of children. If you support abortion, you're supporting abuse of children, just children who are in the womb. I don't think they're both issues, in my opinion. If you want to ask me what my stance is on kids in foster care, on kids being abused, I would say any form of abuse against a child is always wrong, whether it's abortion, before birth or after birth. If it's a child being abused before birth, wrong. A child being abused after birth, wrong. Because a child being abused, period, is wrong. That is my stance. That is what I believe. That is what I think. Nothing justifies abusing a child. Nothing justifies murder, murdering a child either. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I never understand. And I understand, like, people make this argument because, again, it's another straw man argument. I realized, because I used to be a pro choice person. I used to think I could be pro choice and pro life personally, because I've always believed believed it's wrong. I've never supported abortion as far as I would be willing to do that to my own child, right? But I used to be like, oh, well, it doesn't affect me. So, if other people want to kill their children, I guess it's fine, but I'm not going to do that. I looked back at that and think that that is a very hypocritical stance to hold, to believe something is wrong for you but okay for other people. It's like, I believe it's wrong if I aborted my own child. I would never do that to my own child. But if someone else wants to, it's fine. And then when I make the analogy, like, would we justify abuse that way? Like, I would never abuse my child, but if another mom wants to abuse their child, it's okay. Like, that would sound insane to be like, it's okay for other people to abuse their children, to justify that. But you believe it's wrong. You don't believe it's okay for you to abuse your children, but you support other women abusing their children. These stances, in my opinion, you can't hold consistently. There's cognitive dissonance there, right? And that's honestly what I am creating by saying things the way I say them. It's to make you think a lot harder about what you are supporting. I say this because it's important to know what you are justifying. What do you stand for? Because if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. I forgot who said that. I know that's in a Katy Perry song. It's in a Katy Perry song. But anyways, absolutely hate when people use that as an argument, because to me it's like you're crapping on the lives of, like, a very vulnerable population it is. Like, not only have these kids gone through some of the most traumatic experiences that it was unfair, like, no child should have to experience abuse, but that child is not wrong for existing just because other people chose to abuse them. Stop blaming the child existing and blame the people abusing them. It is not the child's fault that they were abused. And when you claim and use the lives of people who were abused as the excuse to further abuse other children, you are victim blaming. You're saying it's that child's fault for existing. Therefore, let's just kill them. And also, it's just like they wouldn't exist to begin with if people just stopped. Like a pregnancy, like, children don't come to exist out of nowhere at the end of the day. And I feel like at no point does anyone ever make the argument of preventing that child from existing altogether, because that is my point. I would rather no child ever be aborted because they don't exist to be aborted at all, than to recklessly keep creating lives just to end them. That is where it's abusive becomes from, because people are neglectfully having sex, and then when they're creating lives, they decide, well, I can just kill this child. It's a reckless abuse of your it's at all points, it's just reckless, because that child that child didn't have to exist at all, right? Because you can prevent getting pregnant. I'm 29 years old. I've never experienced having a child. Why? Because I made the choice to wait till marriage. I don't have sex, right? And people act like that's just not an actual option. And it's like, it is an option. It is a choice you can make. If you don't want to have a baby without being married, or you don't want to have a baby if that baby won't have a father, you have 100% of a choice and can control whether or not you have a child without recklessly creating a life and ending it. You can make a better choice for, as far as not sleeping with men you're not married to, or not sleeping with men that are not willing to marry you, or just not having, I don't know. I think, like, this is not to be like, oh, well, I guess it kind of is. It's just like, take some personal accountability. If you are not forced to have sex, right? If you're willingly participating in the act of sex, there's no excuse for that child existing, because you're actively doing something for that child to exist. You're willingly participating in an activity that the purpose of is to create a life. And so it's like you're creating life recklessly, and then now we have millions of babies being aborted because people were sleeping around. And their version of taking accountability is, well, I'm not ready to be a parent, so this child has to die, basically. It's very selfish. And I do know, I say this in every video, I know more women who have had abortions than women who've had babies. And I think that's kind of actually really sad. And you know, I recently had an experience at my job where, I mean, I'm not gonna, obviously, y'all don't know the people I work with, but I had some coworkers basically say they had a pregnancy scare, and one of them was very adamant. She was like, if I'm pregnant, I will make sure, like, I'm not having a kid. I don't want a child. I don't want this, right? So basically saying, like, she would abort the child, she would get an abortion if she was pregnant because she didn't want to have a child. She didn't want kids, right? And so it's just like, people take sex way too, like, people aren't serious enough about the fact that sex is creating another human life. People are so reckless about sex, and I honestly blame it on, you know, what's it called, hookup culture. I blame it on how we've normalized just casual sex and sleeping around, no strings attached. I blame a lot of it on those things. And people have just become so reckless. They forget that life literally is created from the act of having sex, right? And to me, it's just like people aren't making great choices with their bodies, and then because they made not are not making good choices with their own bodies, and then they recklessly create another human life, they're sacrificing and ending the life of an innocent life because they were reckless with their own bodies, and now they're destroying another person's body. And it's kind of just like, it's a cycle of just, like I said, one bad decision after one bad decision after one bad decision. And it's just really not fair. Overall, I think it's unfortunate that this is what we've normalized as our society, in our society, is just, recreational sex creating millions of lives, and then those millions of lives being aborted because people don't care enough. People don't take it seriously enough. So much to get into. Anyways, I said this in another video. I definitely think, you know, hookup culture has created this mentality around sex that I feel like is very unhealthy for men and women. Um, that's made it harder for people to find healthy relationships. And also, it's just like you have these other issues. You're creating all of these lives. So many single parent households, or just children growing up without both parents present in the home. And then that creates more issues for that child. Not having a father present is in a home is not good for a child either. Women having to raise children as single parents is very hard for any woman to experience. And these are all issues that come about because people are making poor decisions about who they are sleeping with. Like, at the end of the day, the root cause of abortion is people having sex casually, people having sex outside of marriage. Because If only married people were having sex, that would mean only married people are having babies. And how many married people are getting abortions? Not most of them. You know, the number one reason people get abortions is because they're not currently with the partner, they're not married to the partner, they don't have the right finances, they don't have these. So it's just like all of these choices people are making, like the choice to get an abortion, there's all of these choices that you make before you're even in that position to begin with. So understanding, like, yes, it's a complex issue, it's, but I do think it's also very black and white. I think people try to make it gray because they make straw man arguments about abortion to begin with, because at the end of the day nothing justifies killing an innocent human life in the womb. That is very black and white. The gray area is what you are trying to do when you're trying to use adopted kids to justify abortion, and when you're trying to use foster kids, kids who are in foster care to justify abortion, and when you're trying to make all of these other arguments that are not, don't negate the fact that I believe, and my stance is, it's always wrong. It's not, never justified to kill an innocent human life. There is nothing that justifies that. That's my stance. Like, I can't justify abortion. My morals don't allow me to justify killing an innocent human being. It doesn't mean that all of these other issues, kids being abused in foster care, kids being adopted, and I feel like adoption can actually be a beautiful thing. I hate that it's given this negative sense. I actually have a coworker who adopted a child out of foster care. I want to become a foster parent. I also plan on adopting at some point. Um, would I rather do those things in a relationship? Yes. Would I marry than as a single woman? But I have actually considered becoming a foster mom while I'm single. Like, one of my life goals was, by if I'm 30, I would want to become a foster parent if I have the finances, which I got to get my finances together, y'all. I got a lot of debt. Anyways, the other ironic thing, or something that I've always loved to point out to people, is that pro people who support abortion or are pro choice, they never expect anything from people with a pro choice stance. If you're pro choice, you don't have to adopt children. If you're pro choice, you don't have to be a foster parent. If you're pro choice, you're not expected to do anything to help the lives of children outside the womb. Like, you being just pro choice makes you a moral good person in a pro choicer's eyes, right? But when someone is pro life, oh, are you adopting children? Oh, are you fostering kids? Are you doing, what are you doing to support all of these things? It's like, why is it only pro lifers who have to care about kids after birth? Like, shouldn't everyone care about those children? Shouldn't everyone want to adopt a kid child in need? Shouldn't everyone want to help kids in the foster care system? Shouldn't everyone want to see less children being abused? Like, why is it that it's only expected if someone says they're pro life, but someone being pro choice is, that's all you have to be? Pro choice, you don't have to care about kids being adopted. You don't have to care. You just use them for argument's sake, because y'all abuse kids in the foster system, and y'all abuse kids who are adopted to justify killing innocent human beings. That's all you care about. That's the only time you care about adopted kids as someone who is pro choice. You never care about them when, about, in any other time, just to justify abortion, and that's it. You use their lives, you devalue them to justify killing other innocent human beings, and I find that to be absolutely disgusting. And I get that people are just pushing around, arguments they've heard other people use without really thinking about them, because too many people are just blindly supporting things without thinking about them for themselves. Well, my political party says we have to support abortion, so I support abortion. Or I'm pro-choice because I took this class in college and it said a woman has a right to abortion and therefore it's my right and therefore I need this. But do you think about what you're actually supporting? Do you think about what it means to say we need adoption because we need abortion because the foster kids in the foster care system are being abused? Like using people who are victims of abuse as an excuse to further abuse children, it's not justified in my head. I do think these are each separate issues, and that's really why it's a straw man argument to begin with, because it's like I said in the very beginning, it's wrong that children in foster care are abused. It's also wrong, and that doesn't negate abortion. An abortion is also wrong. Basically, they're both wrong. That's my stance. Both are wrong. And abortion does not take away children being abused. It doesn't stop children from being abused because abortion is abusing a child just in the womb instead of outside the womb. If you're saying the best way to solve the issue of abuse is to just go ahead and kill that person, that's not how you fix an issue. That's basically like saying, "Oh, if we want to get rid of racism, just get rid of races. Just kill all the black people. Just kill all the minorities and then we don't have any other races." That is basically that's a very extreme way, but that's basically what y'all are pretending is the solution to kids being abused in the foster care system. Instead of them being born, we just kill them first and then we don't have to worry. It's like eliminating a child. Killing a child is not the like killing a person in general is just not how you solve these other issues that are complex. I don't know how else I'm supposed to say that, but yeah, that is my very, I mean, not even emotional, just passionate response, because I honestly, it irks my soul when people use that. And I would never dehumanize or devalue another person's life because of their circumstances. If someone grew up in poverty, I'm not going to say, "Oh, you should have been aborted." I would never say that to someone's face. I don't believe that about a person. Someone's circumstances do not make them any less deserving of life. And my circumstances, right? Being born into, it's like, are you saying someone being born in a wealthy, affluent household is more deserving of life than someone born in poverty? It's like, if you don't break down these arguments, you miss what people are actually saying. You're saying, one, the only people who are deserving of life are those who are born not out of poverty. So poor people, you shouldn't have any kids ever. Poor people, you're not allowed to have children. We're taking that away from you. Like, if these were laws that actually existed, we would live in a very dystopian world, actually. Because something that is universal on this entire planet is that every person's right to life exists despite circumstances. So whether someone's poor, whether someone's rich, whether someone's black, whether someone's white, whether someone's Asian, whether someone's like every person it, who's able who who exists in this world regardless of the circumstances is worthy of life. I would not say a poor person, someone being born in a poor family doesn't deserve to have life. I understand where people get these their arguments from, right? It's basically like, well, my life as a poor person is hard and I wouldn't wish a hard life on someone else, right? But like I said, that other person who you're not wishing a hard life on is someone who already actually exists. It's like if we're not creating kids in circumstances where we're impoverished, then we wouldn't have that to begin with. But on the other side of it, who am I to say someone in poverty doesn't deserve to have kids? Like, that's also not an argument that I would make. Because think about people who live in countries that don't have a lot of wealth, that don't have a lot of access to opportunities. Are we saying people in those places or locations don't deserve to have children. And those people probably love their children more than any rich person would, because they truly value the lives of their children. Like, their children are their biggest blessings. So who are you to say, someone should be limited to how many kids they have based off of how much money they have? Like, I still wouldn't even argue that. And there's kids in those places who are 10 times happier than any privileged person in the world, because they value their life regardless of the circumstances. We take so much for granted with all of the privileges that we have. In a lot of ways, I feel like Americans are very privileged to have the things that we do. And the way some of us look down on other people in other countries who maybe have more poverty, don't have access to the same, you know, amenities and conveniences we have. Some Americans look down on those people and think they're better than someone. And the truth is, you're not better than anyone. It's like, just believing you have more of a right to something or someone should have less of a right to something, I feel like is the problem to begin with. I guess, and personally, my solution to this issue is controlling those children, controlling the problem before it's a problem, right? Instead of creating a child and then ending its life, we should be not creating that child to begin with until we're actually ready to have kids. That means you have to make better choices with who you are choosing to have sex with. And that is something every person has control over. And I think people don't like that idea either, because people don't want to hold themselves accountable. People want to blame other people and blame circumstances. But like I said, anyone who is willingly having sex with people, not thinking about the consequences, or oftentimes using access to abortion as the reason they're even willing to participate in certain activities, which I addressed in my opinion. Abortion is used as a form of birth control. It's like, okay, even if I am sleeping around and do happen to get pregnant, I can just abort the child. So it's like people are more willing to make worse choices with the people that they're sleeping with, because they see abortion as a form of birth control. So it's just like it almost also creates the problem to begin with. And if you really think about it, the abortion industry profits off of people having unwanted pregnancies. So, in order for abortion to exist, they have to promote things that lead to unwanted pregnancies. So, they don't want people to be married. They don't want people to be in long lasting relationships, healthy relationships with a partner where a child could have a two-parent home. I don't think the abortion industry values things that are actually beneficial to women or to children overall, because the abortion industry thrives off of women being reckless in a lot of ways, people being reckless. And of course, the abortion industry does not value children at all, except for it to be used as medical waste that they now sell to big pharma companies, which is just another abuse of the sanctity of life, in my opinion, to use aborted babies for profit, selling the aborted babies to medical companies or whatever. I've said it in another video. Abortion is so evil. I can never support it. And again, I don't think the problem is gray. I think it's very black and white. I think people want to think it's gray because they're so used to hearing these manipulative arguments that are actually straw man arguments. You're arguing against something that I'm not addressing. and then trying to tie it to abortion, right? Children being abused in foster care is not the same as, is a different issue from abortion, right? But because people want to use children being abused in foster care as a reason we need abortion, that's the why you think it's a gray area, but they're actually completely separate issues. Y'all are just so used to using straw man arguments to justify abortion, you don't recognize that those two things can both be problems. They're separate issues actually, not one and the same. So not a gray area, black and white. And that's all I have to say.